Has the next workshop begun yet?
No, not yet. We'll start in a minute or two. Make sure everyone has come in. Okay, well, I think the majority of people who are going to be coming have come in now, so we'll start our workshop, Intro to Java. Welcome to the workshop. So hi, I'm Anna Lee. Currently I'm a sophomore at Oxford Academy. Some things about me are that I like chocolate and sleep, and I very much dislike homework.
Hi guys, I'm Angelina Zhang. I'm also a sophomore at Oxford, and some things about me, I like coding, obviously, and I also like tennis, and I severely dislike debugging.
So for this workshop, we're going to be using Repl.it. I'm not sure if all of you were at the opening ceremony, but if you were, I believe you will have made a Repl.it account. So if you haven't, I'll send the link to the website in chat right now so you can make an account for yourselves. Angelina is going to be demoing a lot of the stuff that we're going over in these slides on Repl.it, and you can follow along with her if you make an account. So I sent the link in chat. Did everyone get that link?
Oh, and if you don't have a Repl.it account, but you want to follow along anyways, you can use the second link. That doesn't require a sign-in.
I'll send that one to chat as well. So while you guys are doing that, we're just gonna quickly go over variables, which are our first section of our slide. So what are variables? Variables are basically pieces of memory that can store data in your Java code, and they're used to carry out tasks and run Java functions. Each variable has a certain data type, which determines what sort of values can be stored in it. And primitive variables, which we'll be going over in the next slide, is the most common type of variables, and they store like really simple pieces of information. So our three most common primitive variable types are Boolean, integer, and double. So the Boolean, basically it can only store true or false. And down here we have examples of Boolean variables. Boolean happy equals true and Boolean sad equals false. Next we have integers, which is abbreviated to just int. And this can only store integers, whether it be positive or negative, and it cannot store decimals. And we have examples down here as well in case you need a reference. And finally, we have double, which can store both integers and decimals of up to 17 decimal points. And again, we have examples. So double decimal equals 0.12345. Or if you just want to store an integer, you can just do double decimal 3 equals 5.0. Next, we have string variables. Strings are not primitive variables. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, so next we have string variables. Would you guys like to stay on, if you guys are taking notes, do you guys want to stay on the previous slide? Or is it okay if we go on? Okay, I'll take that as a go on. So we have string variables. String is not a primitive variable type, but yeah, we can actually, yeah, I'll send the link to these slides right now in chat so you guys can follow along at your own pace. Sorry about that. No. Hold on, let me just change the permissions on these. Okay. Tell me if that works. Need access. Oh no.
Also,
We
we'll be
need
going more in
access.
depth.
Okay.
Sorry.
Angelina, could you change it so that anyone with the link can access?
We'll be going more. What? But I made the slide.
Sorry to interrupt.
Hang on a sec.
I just wanted to let everyone else know that at the end of the hackathon today, we'll be sending out a recap email, and that will include all of the slides, all the links that we've used today. So if you're worried about taking notes to save for later, don't even worry about it. We will send you all the slides and all the resources possible. For right now, though, once the link works, I'd suggest following along on the slides.
Ria, could you check if you have access to the slides? Because I think I accidentally got rid of.
Yeah, I don't have access either.
Yeah.
Let me see. Yeah, it changed to restricted and I still have it.
Oh no. Wait, did Angie make the slides?
No, I have it. I'll send it to you guys.
Okay, sorry.
No problem.
Guys.
So the link over here, the link works now, and everybody that has a link will be able to view it. And then Anna and Angelina, I'll add you guys as editors back on here. Sorry about the technical difficulties. I'm sure you guys will be able to go on from here. Okay, cool. All right, continue.
Okay, sorry about that, guys. All right, so continuing on our slides, strings are not primitive variable types, but they are almost as commonly used as the 3 primitive variable types that we went over in the previous slide, which are Boolean, integer, and double. Basically, string variables can store a string of characters. These can include punctuation, just letters, numbers, spaces, stuff like that. And yeah, they're usually surrounded by quotation marks. And down here are some examples of string variables. So for the string variable type, we have different methods you can use to manipulate them. So .length will return the length of the string, so how many characters there are in the string. .substring has parameters called int start and int end. So basically, it'll return a section, a part of the string, starting from the index start to index end. I think Angelina will demo this sort of thing later in the Repl.it. Next is, okay, yes, there were, wait, Angelina, can you go back to the previous slide? Yeah, okay, so we have two more string methods. Dot equals checks whether strings are the same as each other, so it'll either return true or false. And dot index of will return the index or the location of a certain string within a string. If it's not there, it'll just return -1. What is its purpose? Oh, okay, so strings basically, actually, I'll answer your question after we're done with this section. Sorry, I'll get to that. So how to name variables. First off, we can use, these aren't exact rules, but they're definitely something that is very commonly found in programming, and it's recommended that you name variables this way. So we're going to be using something called lower camel case, which basically means you start the variable with a lowercase letter. And for every other word that comes after that, you can't have spaces when you're naming variables. So you have to like keep it all within one word. So if you have a variable whose name is like multiple different words combined together, like lower camel case, you're gonna start the next word after the first word with a capital letter, like so. And second, I already said this, but it cannot contain spaces. Otherwise, the compiler will not read it as a variable name. And you have to always start it with a letter. So make sure you don't start it with like an exclamation point or a number. And you should remember that all variable names are case sensitive, which means the compiler will read whether or not it's lowercase or capital case. So how to create a variable. This is the basic format of how to create a variable. So first you'll have the data type, and following that will be the name of your variable. And then after an equal sign, you'll assign its value. So you have examples down here where you start with data type integer, and then name it size, and then assign a value of 25. Okay, next. Next, you can also create a variable and then change the value of it later. So over here, if you see, we initialized variable x, integer x, and then we assigned it a value of 13 later. Same thing with string down here. So Angelina will take over for this next one. She's going to be demoing some of the stuff that we learned so far in Repl.it.
Okay, so first of all, whenever you type code in Repl.it, make sure you type it between these two red curly braces, because if you don't, then otherwise your code won't work. So yeah. So first of all, your Repl.it should look like this. If it doesn't, just reload the page or start a new one or something. So this statement right here, system.out.println hello world. If you run that, it will literally print out hello world for you. So system.out.println is like the print statement, and it'll print to the console. So if you want to print like another message, so then you put system.out.println and then parentheses, and inside the parentheses, you can print a string using quotes. So, and at the end of every statement, you need a semicolon. So don't forget that. It's like in English, you have a period at the end of every sentence. Well, in Java, we have a semicolon. So that will print like that. And so we have a couple variables also. For example, if you wanted to create a Boolean variable, you'd just say Boolean, and we give it a name. Boolean, for example, is remember we're using camel case, and the default value for Booleans is false. If you're making an int, you would just say int, and ours equals 0, and make sure you have a semicolon at the end of every statement. This is a double variable. Double awesomeness score equals 0.0, and so the default value for a string is just empty quotes. So this is, for example, a purpose of using a string is if you wanted to store someone's name, you'd have to store it as a string because obviously a name isn't true or false, it's not a number. And so this is the best option for storing names. And if, well, for now, my name is Angelina Zhang, so I'll just put that in. And if I wanted to print out my name, it's already stored in the name variable. So later on, I can just access it like this. So instead of literally typing in my name here, I can just use the variable, and that will print out my name. And as you can see, my name is printed out right there. Can you guys type in the chat if, like, on a scale of 1 to 5, how well you're following along so far? Like 5 being really well and 1 being you're totally lost. 3-ish, 2. All right, so basically this is all we're doing right now is you use system.out.println to print out statements to the console, and whatever you want to print out goes inside the parentheses. Now you can print out strings, you can print out pretty much anything. We can replace this with a number and it will just print out 5, or you replace this with a variable of type int and it will print out int, for example. These are all just basically this right here, lines 6 through 9 is what you want for the program that we're doing. So Boolean is true or false. Right now we're setting it to false. Ints are whole numbers basically, so we're setting that to 0 for now. Doubles are decimals, so we do 0.0, 0.0. And strings are like words basically. And my name is Angelina, so that I'm making that my name.
So I'm not sure if you guys have any more questions, but if you do, you can type them in chat. But I think for now, we'll go back to the presentation. So next up, we have logic. So logic includes things called Boolean operators. So if you remember from the variables part section, we had a variable type called Boolean, which stores true and false. So Boolean operators, which are also known as logical operators, they compare Boolean values. So they compare true and false. So these are 3 operators that we use to compare Boolean values. This double ampersand means and. So if you're comparing 2 different Boolean values, both values have to equal true for the entire expression to equal true. Otherwise, if there's even one Boolean variable that's a Boolean value that equals false, then the whole thing will equal false. And these 2 double lines, I'm not sure what they're called, but if you use that to compare Boolean values, it'll mean or. So that means just one of the Boolean values has to equal true for the entire expression to equal true. And the exclamation point means not. So if you use it in front of a true Boolean value, that value will become false, and vice versa for false. So next we have relational operators. Relational operators are symbols that compare two different values. Usually you'll be comparing integers or doubles, so decimals or just numbers in general. So we have, when you're wanting to find whether or not two values are the same or equal to each other, you're going to use two equal signs. And then for greater than or equal to, you'll use a greater than sign and an equal to sign next to each other. And the greater than sign is pretty self-explanatory. And next we have exclamation point and equal sign, which means not equal to. And less than or equal to and less than are the following. This might not make sense right now, but hopefully it'll make a little more sense later when Angelina does the demo. So I think Angelina should be
Okay.
switching over to the Repl.it now. Make sure
Right,
to
so
type
first
if you
of
have any questions.
yeah, sorry. So first of all, make sure your code looks pretty much like this. If you put 2 slashes, that's a comment. It comments out the code, so you can see it, but the computer won't. So we can comment out the first line. All right, so make sure your code looks like this to start with. So this is like a demonstration of the Boolean operator. So for example, we have a Boolean is a cool person. So if we can print out the result of for example, if is a cool person is equal to false, this will evaluate what is a cool person is false, so that this statement is true. So it will print out true. So that's the equals operator. So if you want to compare two things, you have to use 2 equal signs. If you just want to change the value, then you use 1 equal sign. That's an assignment operator. So now this, because is a cool person is true, this as a whole is false, so it'll print out false. And for example, ours is currently 0, but if we want to add 1 to ours, I don't know if we cover that, but that's basically ours equals ours plus 1. So if ours is greater than or equal to 2, it will print true, and if it's not, it will print false. Ours is currently 1, so it will print false, for example. Any questions so far? Spaces, okay, so in variable names, such as awesomeness score is a cool person, obviously the spaces do matter, you can't have them. But here you can delete the spaces and it doesn't really change anything, it just looks better, I think, if you add spaces. These all pretty much do nothing. Or you could add like a ton of spaces and it wouldn't change anything, really.
If you put one as like false and one as true, like would it mess up the code or would it like just choose one randomly?
So that depends. We can make a second Boolean. Boolean b equals true. So if we're using Boolean operators, if is so double ampersand means and, which means both statements have to be true. Let me move this over. So if is a cool person is true and b is true, then it'll print true.
Okay.
But if one of these is false, for example, if we change this to false, then they are not both true, so it will print false.
Okay.
Eventually, it will print false. But if we change this to or, meaning one of them, this or this has to be true, then it will still print true right now because one of them is true.
Okay.
But if we change this, add an exclamation point, that basically reverses it. So now is a cool person is false. Now these are both false, so it will print false. Any other questions? Anyway, make sure your code pretty much looks like this for now, and we can go back to the slides.
So next we have control structures. These are going to be very helpful in your code. So first we have if-else statements. If-else statements executes the code if a certain condition is true. So again, that incorporates the Boolean and relational operators that we were using just now. So this is an example of an if-else statement. So if is raining equals false, then the system will print out what a nice day. If is raining is not false, and if it's like true, it'll print out grab an umbrella.
Okay, so we just simply printing out this value is kind of useless if you're trying to make a program. So instead, we'll put this in a if-else block. So if is a cool person is true. Now, when you have control structures like if, else, or for loops or while loops, instead of having a semicolon at the end, you'll have two curly braces. So these two go together. We'll add more spaces there. So if it's a cool person, then we will print out you are cool. And if is a cool person is false, we will print out for a loser. Actually, I changed my mind. If is a cool person is true, then we will wait a minute. Just kidding. If it's false, we will subtract 100.3 from your awesomeness score. So you can do this a couple of ways. You can like shorthand it kind of by doing minus equals, awesomeness score minus equals 100.3, or you can do this awesomeness score equals awesomeness score minus 100.3. Either way is fine. Just make sure your code looks kind of like that. And once we do that, we want to print out a message. So if you haven't figured it out yet, this is kind of like a sort of personality quiz, except it's completely biased because I made it. So we will print out this message. And the thing about strings is that you can add them together. So we're going to add the actual awesomeness score in the message here. And then we'll do another plus sign and period. So make sure there is a space here so it doesn't get like all smushed together. And basically, if is a cool person is false, you are not awesome, right? So your awesomeness score gets deducted and you are a loser. Else, if is a cool person is true, then you are a winner. I can spell, I promise. Okay, so everyone on a scale of 1 to 5, how caught up are you, I guess? Just type that in the chat real quick.
Yeah, Angelina, do you know if you can like share the Repl.it to them? Like just make sure, like as a viewer, not an editor. I think some people.
I'm not sure, but the program code is like on the last slide. So if you want to just look at what the code is, it's at the very end of the presentation.
Yeah, you could do that as well.
Okay.
So, Edward, you typed in 1. Is there any like particular thing you're confused about?
You're going too fast.
Okay, I see. Sorry about that. Is there anything you want us to catch you up on so far? Or do you just want us to slow down in general?
Slow down in general.
Okay, we'll try to do that. Sorry about that. Okay, so if no one else has any questions, I think we can move on to the next slide.
I'm a bit stuck on
yeah.
Booleans and variables part.
Okay, so what exactly are you confused about? Or are you just confused about like the overall premise of variables?
Kind of the overall like.
Okay, so variables basically they're like, so right here in our demo, you know how it says Boolean is a cool person equals false? That basically stores false, like the value false, into is a cool person. So if you want to use the value false for something, you could type out is a cool person. And so down here you see these if else statements that Angelina printed out starting from line 10. If you call on is a cool person, like she does right here in the parentheses after if, so that calls on is a cool person, which equals false. So in this statement, is a cool person equals false, that will equal true, because is a cool person is also false. Does that make sense, or is that
so this statement is basically just saying, since is a cool person is false, it's basically just false equals false, and
okay.
is a true statement, right?
Yeah.
And then yeah, and then it's basically the same for the rest of the variables, except they're just storing different types of values. So integers, so integers will store integers, which are all values except for decimals, and then double will store decimal points.
Okay, so integers obviously only include integers, and then double includes decimals along with integers.
Yep, that's right. And both can store both positive and negative.
Okay, and it could be like anything. It's not referring to like a specific number. It could be like any.
Yeah, it can be any number as long as it is like what the variable type refers to.
Okay.
Is there anything else you're having trouble with?
I think that's all. And then Boolean is just like referring to whether a statement is true or false.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. So if anyone else has any questions at like any time, and if we have time at the end, we'll go over whatever confusions you have. So you can always type in chat and we'll try to answer as best as we can. So next, after if else statements, we have while loops. And while loops, they're basically what they suggest they are. They loop and like repeatedly run a statement while a condition is true. So this also uses the relational operators that we went over. So in this example right here, we make the variable I, which is equal to 0. So while I is less than 10, we're going to have the program print out I. And the output is going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But this, I'm not sure if we went over this yet, but this I++ right here, followed by the semicolon, basically what it does is it's going to increase I by 1 every time the while loop runs. So the first time the loop runs, it's going to make integer I equal to 1, and then next time it's going to equal to 2, and then 3, and then so on until it reaches 9. And then eventually your output will look like this: 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. I believe Angelina will demo that.
Okay, so while loops are pretty simple. So okay, we will do that here. So while we need to start out with a sort of counter. So int I equals 0. While, and inside here is like a condition. So while this condition is true, this is just any type of Boolean statement. So it could be like while is a cool person equals false, or while our I is less than ours. We will do some code right here. And then when I stops being less than ours, we will stop. That's pretty much all there is to it. So while I is less than ours, we will increase awesomeness score. By 10. We will increase awesomeness score by 10. So if I just leave my code like this, that would actually be very bad, because since I never changes, the while loop would keep going forever and ever and ever, and then our computer would crash and the world would end. So we have to also increase I plus every single time. That way, the first time this loop runs, I is equal to 0. Then the second time it runs, I will equal to 1. And eventually I will equal to whatever ours is, and then it will stop. Right, so it would almost be like a forever loop, except that would be bad. So we have to have some sort of limitation here. And right now, the code wouldn't do anything because ours is equal to 0. So we will fix that later. Questions, comments, concerns? I++ is basically the same thing as I equals I plus 1. It's just a lot faster to type. Okay, so we'll equals is basically comparing two variables. Basically, if this and this are the same, equals is basically just asking, are these two things the same thing? And for Taryn, we'll go over the code and debugging later. So at the end, and if you're still confused, the actual program code is at the end of the presentation. Right, so equals is just a question for comparing. All right, we'll go on to for loops.
So for loops is okay. So make sure if you have questions to leave them in chat, and we'll go over them later. For loops, basically, they're going to be like a combination of what we just went over. So the while loop with the integers and stuff, except you're going to initialize the variable. So that means just create the variable inside the for loop, as well as include the condition and the increment all in like one line. So it's kind of like a shorthand for what we just went over. So this is the format. First, you're going to create the variable and then add a semicolon and then add the condition for, so I want this code to run as long as this is true. So in this case, it's going to be I is less than 10. And the increment basically increases or decreases, whichever you choose to do, the variable that you created within these parentheses. And this code is going to print out the same thing as it printed out in the while loop. I'm not sure exactly how to, I'm not sure if it'll be very clear if I explain it without Angelina demoing, so I'll hand that over to her for now.
All right, so while loops and for loops are basically the same thing, just in different formats. So we can change this section of code to a for loop. So instead of while, we'll say for, and we'll move this line here. So basically 4, and this is initializing our counter, so int I equals 0. This is our condition, I is less than hours, and this is our increment. And these are all separated by semicolons. So I equals I plus 1, or remember, we can just say I plus plus, which is a lot easier. So this basically did the exact same thing as before with the while loop. We have the initialize the variable, and then you have a condition for when the for loop is going to stop, and then you have an increment, so something to change the counter here. Right, so make sure your code looks like this on the screen, and we can answer questions now if anyone has them. No questions? All right. So moving on.
So next we're going to go over user input, which basically means what it suggests. You're going to take input from the user and incorporate it into your code. So to use user input, you have to import a scanner class as the first line of your code. So there are like certain classes and packages you can import into Java to like make use of them. And Angelina will show you with the Repl.it.
So scanner is like an external package. It doesn't come with Java, but you can still use it. So at the very, very, very top of your Repl.it on line 1, make a new line there and say import java.util.scanner and a semicolon. And if your code isn't working, make sure first of all that all your code is going in between these two curly braces, or this one. And then make sure that all of your statements have semicolons at the end. Right, so yeah, that's importing java.util.scanner. And now you're allowed to use scanner in your code.
Shruti, I'm not sure. So you can use you use semicolons when you're like, for example, when you're assigning variables, when you're creating variables. But for the control structures that we went over, so like if else or like for loops or while loops, those are going to use curly braces.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think if no one else has any more questions, we can go on to the next slide. So this is just scanners, but continued. So if you want to use the scanner to accept user input, you're going to have to create a scanner object. So this is kind of like creating a variable, but since scanner is not a primitive, it's not a variable type, it's an object, you're going to have to use the words new scanner and then system.in within the parentheses that follow it. And you can use different scanner methods depending on what type of user input you're expecting. So if you're expecting integer input, then you'll be using integer age equals s.nextInt. S is the name of the scanner object that we created. And then, yeah, for the following, so if you're expecting doubles, you're going to put .nextDouble. And then if you're expecting string scanner methods, in this case, it's going to be creating a way for you to take an input from the user. So if someone's using your program and you want them to like, let's say, for example, if you have to input your age in for something, you're gonna have to like type something out in a keyboard for the program to accept that, right? So the scanner method allows users to input information into the code. Does that make sense? If you're further confused, I think Angelina will demo now, so you can ask questions in chat.
Okay, so far, if you look at the variables we made at the very beginning, is a cool person, hours, awesomeness, score, and name, they're kind of like hard-coded into the program, like users can't change them. So I'm gonna take out my name there. And instead, we want to ask the user what their name is and whether or not they're a cool person. So we're going to use scanner. So in order to use scanner, first of all, you have to make a scanner object. So just type this in like word for word. Scanner s equals new scanner system.in and semicolon. So this line will allow you to use the variable s as a scanner. So for example, we want to ask the user whether or not they are a cool person. So we will give the variable is a cool person the value of s dot next Boolean, because is a cool person is a Boolean. And we also want to like let them know that they have a question to answer, because how will they know that if we run this code, eventually it will run. Okay, there's an issue there. We'll fix that later. Oh, I spelled awesomeness wrong. That's funny. So we need to basically ask the user a question so they know that they need to answer. So we use system.println for this. And the question will be, well, it's not really a question. Chocolate is the best food. And don't forget the semicolon at the end. And now the program is saying chocolate is the best food, true or false, and we're going to answer true because obviously it is. And that will run the rest of the code. So far, nothing's happening, but yeah. So this we can condense into one line. We can just set the value of is a cool person to s.next Boolean, which is a lot easier. And this basically will give us, this statement here asks for user input in the form of a Boolean variable, and that will assign true to is a cool person. And we can do the similar things for the rest of these. So for example, hours is how many hours of homework do you have? And hours will equal s.nextInt because hours is an int variable. So we are expecting user input in the form of an int variable. Double awesomeness score is going to be calculated inside the program, so we don't need user input for this. This is just something we're using inside our code, like internally. And obviously, name, what is your name, and string name is equal to s.next line, which will give you the next line that the user inputs. So far your code should look like this. On a scale of 1 to 5, how well is everyone following along so far?
It might be a little confusing since we're including quite a lot in this presentation. So if you guys are completely confused, that's fine. We'll, as long as we have time, we'll make sure to go over everything at the end. Okay, 333. Are there any particular questions you guys have, or is it just overall confusion about the material? Overall confusion. Okay, that is completely fine and also kind of expected. I was also very confused when I first started learning. Yes, I think that's it for our presentation. Angelina, is there anything else you wanted to demo with the Repl.it?
Yeah, so yeah, that's pretty much it. Basically what's left is just making this program work. Hold on, let me change the settings. Okay, so this program so far we have a scanner to take user input, and the program will print out the question, chocolate is the best food, true or false, and it'll assign the value that we type in to is a cool person. So if you say true, then is a cool person is now true. Then it prints out how many hours of homework do you have right here. And whatever you type in should be a number that will be assigned to the variable hours. Personally, I have 25 hours of homework every night. So that I will type in 25. Right now we have an error because it's not waiting for us to type in the name. I will figure out this error in a second. Okay, so sometimes I forget this, but after you're done using scanner, you have to close it so it stops expecting more input. So at the end, after all of these questions, before your if block, just type s.close and that'll stop the scanner. So this is our code so far. For every hour of homework you have, it adds 10 currently, but that's a little bit boring and very predictable. So instead, I want to add points depending on the number of letters in your name. So I will do name.length. And this right here, if you guys remember, is a string method. .length will give you the length, the number of characters in your string. And I have like 13 letters in my full name, plus a space is 14. So instead of 10 points, I get 14. If your name is short like Anna Lee, then you're out of luck. And as you can see, I don't like chocolate, so my score is negative 100.3. All right, so that's pretty much the entire code. If you guys have questions or your code isn't working, we can help debug a little bit.
Is that actually the entire code from the start?
Yes, that is
Okay.
pretty much what we've done using all of this stuff here.
Okay.
So if you guys are a little confused, I know Java is it's a big, we covered a lot of things in this workshop, and Angelina, you guys did such a great job. But a lot of this material overlaps with other languages. They might have different syntaxes and ways of actually coding it out, but the basic idea of variables and scanners, they're all basically the same, right? So when we go into other workshops, if you're still a little bit confused, it might help for you to attend the Python workshop, where Gabriel will probably be going over kind of the same thing, but in a different language. So that might help you guys. If you, after today, you really want to learn more about Java and you're just a little confused, feel free to reach out to me. I'm sure we could set up a time and I can walk you through a couple of slides from the presentation on your own. So just let us know. Yeah, and also there was somebody in the chat who said their if statement wasn't working. So if you want to debug your code today during lunch or something, just let me know and we can hop on the VC on the Discord server and we can try to troubleshoot your code over there too. So just reach out if you have questions. I know we're reaching the end of our workshop time. Anna, Angelina, do you guys want to wrap it up?
I don't think there's anything else we need to go over during the workshop, but I think we just need to send the attendance link and take the screenshot.
Yes. Okay, so I'll be taking the group photo now. So if you guys want to turn on your cameras and stop. Cool. So I'm going to be taking it in 3, 2, 1. Perfect. So thank you, Anna and Angelina, for your great presentation. And I think our next workshop will be Intro to Artificial Intelligence with Catherine. So yeah, please be sure to fill out the attendance form, and we'll see you all back here in, I think, in 15 minutes.
Thank you guys for coming. Hope you guys learned something.